Good morning, gardeners. I'm Anna, and I'm in the Unity Church Children's Garden, and I welcome you to join me this morning. It's a lovely day, and the birds are singing, and the sun's out, and I'm really enjoying the shade of our crabapple tree. And I wonder, as I look at the shadow that I'm sitting under, have you ever seen a shadow on a cloudy day? Light and shadow seem to be opposite forces, and yet the shadow depends on the light for its very existence. Much in nature is like the light and the shadow, intertwined in ways that we don't always understand. The ancient Chinese had a term for this. They called it the yin and the yang. And they're two things that seem to be opposite, but are really connected. And we could say that light and shadow are complementary, and they are like the yin and the yang. Let us light our chalice and think about darkness and light, the yin and the yang. And join with me now. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth and the warmth of love. Can you sing the song with me? Rise up, O flame. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. And then we move to our joys and sorrows. And today I would like to have us think about the darkness and the light that are bound together, the two opposites. And I'll give you a chance to do this at home with your own joys and sorrows, or maybe you just keep it in your heart. We created a pollinator garden in this space, and the whole idea is to invite pollinators into this space where there would be food and places to hide. And pollinators include bees and wasps and butterflies and even hummingbirds. And the butterflies and the hummingbirds people get really excited about. The bees and the wasps, I think people are more likely to be afraid of. And in Minnesota, people tend to call all of those critters bees, whether they're technically bees or not. So what I'm wondering about this week is, does the principle of the yang and the yin, the light and the dark, does that apply to bees and wasps? And we're going to think about that as Dan reads her story this week.
Today's story is The Giant Jam Sandwich. Story and pictures by John Vernon Lord, with verses by Janet Burroway. One hot summer in Itching Down, 4 million wasps flew into town. They drove picnickers away. They chased farmers from their hay. They stung Lord Swell in his fat, bald pate. They dived and hummed and buzzed and ate. And the noisy, nasty nuisance grew till the villagers cried, "Oh, what can we do?" So they called a meeting in the village hall, and Mayor Muddlenut asked them all, "What can we do?" And they said, "Good question." But nobody had a good suggestion. Then Bap the baker leaped to his feet and cried, "What do wasps like to eat?" "Strawberry jam." "Now, wait a minute. If we made a giant sandwich, we could trap them in it." The gentleman cheered, the ladies squealed, and Farmer Seed said, "Use my field." Bap gave instructions for making of the dough. Mix flour from above and yeast from below. Salt from the seaside, water from the spout. Now thump it, bump it, bang it about. While they were working and working hard, some more made a tablecloth out in the yard. And when they were done, the dough was left to rise till the loaf was a mountain in shape and size. They hitched it up with a bit of fuss to tractors, cars, and the village bus. They took it to the oven they made on the hill, 50 cookers in an old brick mill. For hours and hours they let it cook. It swelled inside till the windows shook. Oh, it was piping hot when they took it out, and the villagers raised a mighty shout. "Isn't it crusty? Aren't we clever?" But the wasps were just as bad as ever. The loaf was left to cool, and then the people watched while 6 strong men took a great big saw and sliced right through. Everybody clapped, and they cut slice too. The village bus, they all agreed, would spoil the fields of Farmer Seed, so 8 fine horses pulled the bread to where the picnic cloth was spread. A truck drew up and dumped out butter, and they spread it out with a flap and a flutter, spoons and spades, slap and slam, and they did the same with the strawberry jam. Meanwhile, high above the field, 6 flying machines whirred and wheeled, ready for the wasps to take the bait. And then there was nothing to do but wait. Suddenly, the sky was humming. All 4 million wasps were coming. They smelled that jam. They dived and struck. They ate so much that they all got stuck. The other slice came down, kersplat, on top of the wasps. And that was that. There were only 3 that got away, and where they are now, I cannot say. But they never came back to Itching Down, which is not a waspish sort of town, but a very nice place to dance and play, and that's what the villagers did that day. And what became of the sandwich? Well, in Itching Down, they like to tell how the birds flew off with it in their beaks and had a feast for 100 weeks. And that is the story of the wasps and the giant jam sandwich.
So kids often ask me, is that story real? I call this a tall tale. I think the idea of someone baking a loaf of bread as big as a school bus and cutting it up and making a giant sandwich and holding helicopters to hold those pieces of breads down and trapping the wasps in it. You think that's true? Probably not. That's the fun part of the story. But wasps can be a problem, and that is a true part of the story. And so I want to talk a little bit about wasps today. The wasps that are the most troublesome are usually colonial, which means that they live in big nests, and there are thousands of wasps that live together. But there are many wasps that are solitary and live alone, and they generally don't cause us much trouble at all. Regardless of whether they're colonial or solitary, the story of a wasp starts the same way. There's a queen who has mated, and she crawls under some leaves or into a log and spends the winter there. And she hibernates. All the rest of the hive dies. Only the queen survive. And in the spring, the queen comes out and she looks for a nice spot for her nest. It might be under the eaves of a house. It might be in a tree somewhere, someplace where it's sheltered from the wind and the rain. And she starts to make her nest. And she'll lay her eggs in it, and one by one the eggs go in, and she tends those eggs, and just like a human mother, she guards those eggs. She guards her babies. That's when we can get into trouble, when we accidentally step on a nest or bump it or didn't know it was there. So that's kind of where wasps get to be a problem. The amazing thing about them, though, is that she's got to feed those babies too. And those babies love to eat caterpillars. Sometimes they eat spiders. But anyway, the mother goes out and she finds all these caterpillars and she paralyzes them with her stinger, and then she'll put them in there and feed them to her young. So there's something here for us to think about, because those very same caterpillars are the ones that are eating up our kale over there. Those very same caterpillars eat the cabbage and eat the tomatillos, they eat the squashes, all those sorts of things. So in that sense, these wasps that we are so afraid of are really helpful to us and help us grow our food. So they're a benefit. So if you think of light and dark, the yang and the yin, it's just amazing, because nature is just not as clear-cut. It's not so simple as we make it out to be. There's always the good and the bad in there together. Recently, I was visiting with a friend, and I watched as a wasp landed on a fence post, and it was very, very still. And I could see its wings kind of flick, but it was concentrating hard, and it was looking straight down. Got a little closer, and I could see that its head was right next to the wood. And when I got closer still, I heard a little crunch, crunch, crunch. What in the world was that wasp doing? When it flew away, I looked at the wood, and there was a pale strip where the wasp had been. And she returned several times. Each time she put her head down, her wings flicked, and there was the little crunch. She was eating the wood, or chewing the wood. Now, most creatures can't digest wood, so what in the world was she doing with it? Well, wasps chew that wood, and they mix it with their saliva, and they carry it back to their nest, and that's what they make their nest out of. And if you look at this picture, it shows you a few of the early cells of this wasp's nest. And if you see different colors of gray, each little stripe of gray was one mouthful of wood pulp that mother wasp carried back. Think how many trips she needed to make that nest. Just amazing. There's another wasp that I am really fond of. It's a solitary wasp, and it's called a potter wasp. And if you think of humans who are potters, they take a potting wheel and a chunk of clay, and the wheel spins, and they pull it up, and they make bowls and cups and plates and all sorts of fun stuff out of it. The potter wasp does something like that too. Again, she uses her mouth, and she carries glob by glob, mouthful by mouthful, she carries a glob of mud back to her nest site, and she shapes it into this perfect little ball that ends up being about the size of a blueberry. And it's hollow inside. She puts her egg in there, lays her egg, and then she goes out and finds caterpillars, like the ones eating my kale, and she stuffs them in the hole, and then she seals it, and that's where the baby hatches and feeds and pupates and eventually comes out as an adult. So wasps were not only the first paper makers, wasps were the first potters as well. Think about that. And think about the yin and the yin as you go about your work this week and as you hopefully come to the garden and come visit and do some work here. I will say, I have one thing to show you. It is almost summer. I guess by the time you watch this video it will be summer. And I can't think of anything better for summer than strawberry jam. And this is strawberry jam, freezer jam, that I made out of strawberries from my garden that I actually froze last year, and then I thawed them and made the jam, and then I made the freezer jam. So if you have a chance to find strawberries at the supermarket or the farmer's market, or go to a farm and pick your own, or maybe you've got some at your house and you can pick them, I encourage you to make some strawberry jam this week in honor of summer. All right, and now we're back here. We had a wonderful time together, and I'm going to think about the light and the dark, the wasps that we're so afraid of and think they're bad, but really there's a lot of good about them too. And I think that applies to people too. So let's extinguish the flame together. We extinguish this flame now, but we know that the warmth of love and the light of truth go with us in our hearts. Have a great week.